Lyra had always known she was different. On Valyria, a planet where strength, intelligence, and the ability to bear offspring defined a person's worth, her difference was cruelly obvious. Born unable to have children, she had been quietly sidelined from a young age. Where her peers were praised for their potential to bring honor to their families, Lyra received cold looks and whispered insults. Her parents, proud nobles in the ruling council, often avoided her presence, treating her as if she were a shadow rather than a daughter. She had learned early to move silently through the grand halls of her family estate, avoiding the laughter and mockery of her peers. At gatherings, other young women would whisper cruel jokes, calling her a withered bloom or flower that will never bear fruit. Men, even those her age, would barely acknowledge her presence, except when they used her as an example of what should be avoided. Every glance, every whisper, every sidelong smile made Lyra's chest tighten. But she had grown used to it. She had no other choice. Lyra's only relief came from the high terraces overlooking the trade outpost of her city. She would spend hours there, watching ships from distant worlds descend onto the landing platforms. Brightly painted freighters, sleek military craft, and delicate passenger ships from dozens of alien civilizations passed through the spaceport. Lyra loved to watch them, imagining the lives of those aboard. She wondered what it would be like to live in a place where she wasn't judged by her bloodline or her ability to bear children, somewhere she might matter for who she was, not what she lacked. One day, the city was abuzz with the arrival of a human delegation. Humans were rare on Valyria. Most aliens considered them unpredictable yet surprisingly capable. The delegation included several soldiers, diplomats, and engineers. They had come to negotiate a trade agreement and strengthen ties between Valyria and human colonies. News of their arrival spread quickly, reaching even the most secluded corners of Lyra's family estate. Curiosity stirred within her. She had never seen a human up close, and she felt a flutter of anticipation. On the day the delegation arrived, she slipped past her guards under the pretense of tending to the estate's gardens and made her way toward the city's central plaza, where the humans had landed. The humans were unlike anything Lyra had imagined. They were taller and broader than most Valyrians, with firm posture and a quiet confidence. Their skin tones varied, and they wore simple uniforms marked with insignias she did not recognize. While some of them talked loudly among themselves, others observed the crowd, scanning the area with calm, intelligent eyes. One human in particular caught her attention. He stood slightly apart from the others, his posture relaxed yet alert, his gaze sweeping over the plaza with quiet attention. He was human, yes, but unlike anyone Lyra had ever met, he seemed to see everything and everyone without judgment. Lyra lingered near the edge of the crowd, trying to remain unseen. But her usual invisibility was disrupted when a group of young Valyrian nobles spotted her. They had been drinking in the excitement of the human arrival, and their cruel nature found a new target. "There she is," one of the girls whispered with a sneer, pointing at Lyra. "The bloom that will never bear fruit." The group laughed cruelly. Another boy mimicked her awkward movements, and soon they were all jeering openly, nudging her and blocking her path. Lyra's heart pounded. She had faced ridicule many times, but never in front of outsiders. Her face burned with humiliation. Before she could retreat, the human soldier she had been watching stepped forward. His presence was calm but commanding. He moved smoothly, standing between Lyra and the mocking group. His height and the breadth of his shoulders created a silent barrier, and his eyes locked on the bullies with a clear message. "Stop." The Valyrians froze. No one had ever intervened on her behalf before, especially not a human. One of the boys stammered, attempting to continue his insults, but the soldier's voice cut through the air with quiet authority. "Enough," he said, his tone firm, but not aggressive. Lyra blinked. She did not understand the language fully, but the meaning was unmistakable. These humans, this one in particular, had stood for her when no one else would. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of safety. The group of nobles muttered angrily among themselves but stepped aside. The soldier extended a hand toward Lyra, a simple gesture of assistance. Hesitant, she allowed him to help her regain her balance. The touch was brief but steadying. It was an acknowledgement of her worth, silent and clear. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the plaza. Valyrians whispered in disbelief. A human had defended the infertile girl, Some snickered, assuming the human must be mocking her too, but many others were stunned into silence. Lyra's cheeks burned, not with shame, but with the unfamiliar warmth of recognition. Over the next few days, the humans remained in the city, conducting their negotiations and observing the Valyrian society. Lyra found herself drawn to the soldier again and again. She would see him walking through the plaza, speaking to other humans yet somehow aware of her presence. Each time their eyes met, she felt a strange comfort and curiosity mingled together. One afternoon, she found herself standing at the edge of a park near the human quarters. She was lost in thought when she noticed the same soldier approaching. He moved quietly, his boots making soft contact with the ground, and his eyes held a steady, unassuming focus. "You come here often?" he asked in a careful, accented Valyrian. His voice was soft yet confident. Lyra blinked. She nodded. I like to watch the ships," she said, unsure why she was speaking. Humans were strange and fascinating. She had always wanted to travel, to leave Valyria and see the stars, yet had believed it impossible for someone like her. He smiled faintly. "I like to watch too," he replied. "Not the ships, but people. You can learn a lot by watching." Lyra hesitated. There was something genuine in his gaze, something that made her want to trust him. She took a small step closer. "Most people, they avoid me," she admitted. The soldier nodded. "I noticed," he said simply. "But that does not mean you are not worth knowing." The words struck her. No one had ever said that. Not her parents, not her peers, not even her teachers. Worth. She repeated it silently in her mind, tasting it as if it were a strange foreign fruit. Worth. From that day onward, their encounters became frequent, but always brief. Sometimes he would nod to her from a distance, sometimes speak a few words about the humans' work on Valyria, sometimes offer silent encouragement. Lyra felt something shift inside her, a spark of confidence, of hope, of possibility. Yet not all eyes were kind. Her family watched these interactions with suspicion. Her father frowned as he observed her standing near the human quarters. "She spends too much time with that outsider," he muttered to her mother. "It will ruin her position and ours. We must prevent it." Her mother, more pragmatic, said nothing. She understood that arguing would accomplish little. Lyra, meanwhile, continued to seek moments alone, drawn inexplicably to the soldier whose presence made her feel seen. It was during one of the city's grand ceremonies that the situation reached a turning point. Valyria held annual celebrations to honor fertility, strength, and noble lineage. Nobles displayed their young adults, showcasing future heirs and promising talents. Lyra, as always, tried to remain unnoticed, slipping past crowds and avoiding the judging eyes. But a group of young nobles noticed her. They cornered her near the central plaza, their laughter sharp and merciless. "Here she is again," one girl said, pointing mockingly, "the bloom that will never bear fruit." Lyra felt the familiar heat of humiliation, but this time something inside her shifted. She did not have to face it alone. The soldier appeared beside her, emerging from the crowd like a shadow. His eyes met hers briefly, offering a silent reassurance. He did not speak. He simply stood between her and the bullies, a steady and unyielding presence. The Valyrians hesitated. The humans were outsiders, and no one expected them to interfere in personal affairs. But the soldier's stance was clear. No one would touch her. The bullies exchanged uneasy glances and eventually retreated, muttering under their breath. Lyra's heart raced, not from fear but from a strange new confidence. For the first time, she felt that she had an ally in a world that had always rejected her. After the crowd dispersed, the soldier bowed slightly toward her, a gesture of respect. Lyra's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she offered a small, hesitant smile. It was the first time in her life she had smiled for herself, not to appease anyone else. "You are brave," the soldier said softly. "Not many stand tall when others try to break them." "You did," Lyra's eyes widened. Brave? She had always thought herself weak, flawed, and unworthy. Yet here was someone from another world, telling her she was brave. Her chest tightened with emotion, but she held her ground, standing taller than she had ever dared. The soldier extended a hand again, this time not to lift her, but simply as a gesture of friendship. Lyra looked at it, hesitated for a moment, and then placed her hand in his. It was a simple connection, but it spoke volumes. She was no longer invisible. Someone had seen her worth, and that alone felt like the beginning of a new life. As the sun set over the city, painting the skies in hues of amber and violet, Lyra stood quietly beside him, watching ships come and go. For the first time, the days following the grand ceremony were unlike any Lyra had ever known. Word of the human soldier who had defended her spread quickly through the city. Some whispered in amusement, calling it a joke, while others looked at her with new eyes, unsure how to reconcile their prejudices with what had happened. For the first time, she felt a mixture of curiosity and cautious pride. People were watching her, but this attention no longer carried the sting of shame. Adam, the human soldier, continued to seek her out in small, unassuming ways. Sometimes he would appear near the terraces, nodding to her with a quiet smile. Other times he would pass by while carrying out tasks for his delegation, his eyes briefly meeting hers, silently asking if she was all right. Lyra began to anticipate these moments, feeling a strange warmth whenever he appeared. One afternoon, she found herself walking toward the outer gardens, her thoughts wandering as she traced patterns in the gravel. She had begun to consider her life differently, imagining what it would be like to leave Valyria and see more of the universe. Perhaps there was more to existence than being judged for what she could not do. Adam appeared suddenly, stepping lightly on the garden path, his boots making soft contact with the stone. He did not startle her. Instead, she felt an odd sense of calm at the sight of him. "You spend a lot of time alone," he said in careful Valyrian, his voice soft but steady. Lyra nodded. "It is easier," she admitted. "Out there among people I am watched, judged, ignored. All at once," he smiled faintly. "Sometimes being alone is the best place to understand who you are," he replied. "But you do not have to stay alone all the time." Lyra blinked, unsure how to respond. It was strange to hear someone speak to her without condescension or mockery. He did not treat her as broken or lesser. He treated her as someone worth noticing. Over the next several days, Adam and Lyra met frequently in the gardens, in the outer terraces, or at quiet corners of the city. They spoke slowly, carefully. Adam asked about her life, her interests, her dreams, and in return, Lyra shared stories she had never told anyone else. She spoke of the longing she had always felt to see distant worlds, to explore planets she had only glimpsed from afar. She spoke of books she had read, lessons she had learned, and the quiet hope she held in her heart that she might someday matter. Adam listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging. He asked questions, sometimes simple, sometimes curious, but always sincere. Slowly, Lyra began to feel something she had never experienced. A sense of belonging, of being valued not for what she lacked, but for who she truly was. However, not everyone was pleased with this newfound attention. Lyra's family grew increasingly uneasy. Her father frowned whenever he observed her speaking with the human soldier. "She is spending too much time with an outsider," he said to her mother. "If this continues, it will embarrass the family. We must intervene." Her mother was quieter but not dismissive. She had long recognized that Lyra was different from other children, but she also understood the importance of subtlety in family politics. "We cannot force her to avoid him," she said softly, "but we must ensure she does not make a public display that damages our standing." Lyra herself was unaware of the subtle tension her father caused. She was too consumed by the quiet joy of having someone see her as more than an object of ridicule. Adam's presence gave her courage she had never known, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the way her heart lifted when he approached. It was during the annual council meeting, a grand event where the nobility of Valyria showcased their future heirs and strength, that tensions came to a head. The council hall was enormous, adorned with banners of every noble family and filled with dignitaries from across the planet. Lyra tried to remain unnoticed, slipping quietly through the crowds as her family prepared to display her siblings and other young nobles. But as she passed near the central stage, a group of young nobles noticed her. They cornered her, their eyes sharp and cruel, and began mocking her loudly. "There she is," one of the girls said with a sneer, "the bloom that will never bear fruit." Still wandering, still dreaming, still hoping. Lyra's chest tightened. The words had been repeated countless times over her life, but their sting never faded. She was about to turn and retreat, her head bowed as always when she felt a presence behind her. Adam stepped forward, moving calmly but decisively between her and the bullies. His eyes scanned the group and the crowd fell silent, sensing the authority and determination in his stance. For the first time, Lyra realized that she did not need to shrink away. "You will not touch her," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The nobles hesitated. No human had ever dared intervene in such matters, and the audacity of this soldier stunned them. The laughter faltered and died, replaced by uneasy whispers. "You will leave her alone," he added, his gaze unwavering. Finally, the group stepped back, muttering angrily under their breath. Lyra's shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. She looked up at Adam, gratitude and amazement mingling in her eyes. Later that evening, she walked quietly with Adam along the terraces, the city lights shimmering below. The air was warm, carrying the sense of alien flora and distant metal from the trade outpost. "Why do you defend me?" she asked softly. Adam looked at her, his expression calm and sincere. "Because it is the right thing to do," he replied simply, "and because no one should be treated as less for what they cannot control. You have value, Lyra, not because of what others say, but because of who you are." Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so long believing she was nothing, so long accepting the judgment of others, that the idea of her own value was almost overwhelming. She nodded quietly, unable to speak, and allowed herself to feel the strange, beautiful weight of hope settle into her chest. The following weeks brought more challenges. Some of the Valyrian nobility began to whisper behind her back, questioning the propriety of a human showing interest in her. Others watched with fascination, curious about the interactions between the human soldier and the so-called infertile girl. Despite the rumors, Lyra continued to meet Adam in quiet corners, learning more about his world, his experiences and his perspective. Adam, too, was changing in subtle ways. He had come to Valyria to observe and negotiate, but he found himself increasingly drawn to Lyra, not out of pity, but because of her quiet strength, her intelligence, and her unspoken resilience. He admired her courage in the face of constant mockery, and the way she carried herself with dignity even when the world refused to see it. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Adam took a deep breath. The city below was alive with activity, but up here on the terraces where they often met, there was only silence. "Lyra," he began, his voice steady. "I know our worlds are different. I know many would not understand. But I want to ask something important." Lyra's heart raced. She had longed for this moment but had never dared hope it could come. "What is it?" she asked softly. Adam stepped closer, bowing his head slightly in respect. "I would like your hand," he said simply. "As a partner, as someone I respect, as someone I care for. If you will have me." The words hung in the air. Lyra felt a wave of shock, disbelief, and joy crash over her all at once. The human who had never mocked her, who had always seen her worth, was asking to stand beside her, not out of duty, not out of pity, but out of genuine respect and affection. The terraces were silent, yet she felt as though the entire world was holding its breath. Lyra had never imagined such a thing. No one had ever asked for her hand before. She had always been an outcast, a shadow, a figure to be ignored or ridiculed. And now, a human, an outsider from another world, was offering her something she had never dared to dream of: choice, dignity, and companionship. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to his. I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. Adam's expression softened, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Then we walk together," he said, taking her hand in his. As they left the terraces side by side, Lyra felt a sense of liberation unlike anything she had ever known. The whispers and stares of the crowd followed them, but they no longer mattered. She had been chosen, not for what she lacked, but for who she was. Her family, caught between disbelief and the need to maintain political standing, had no choice but to acknowledge the union. The nobility watched in stunned silence as the human and the alien walked through the halls hand in hand, their presence a quiet but powerful statement. Some sneered, some laughed, and some simply stared, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. But Lyra no longer needed their approval. For the first time, she felt truly free. She had been mocked, overlooked, and dismissed, yet here she was, standing with someone who had seen her, respected her, and chosen her. The world had tried to define her by what she could not give, but she had found someone who valued her for all that she could be. And as the city lights glimmered around them, Lyra realized that this was only the beginning. Her story, once filled with whispers of failure and shame, was now one of courage, respect, and hope. Together with Adam, she would face whatever challenges came next, no longer as an outcast, but as a woman who had finally found her place in the universe. Across the stars, far beyond Valyria, their story would spread.